Broadcasting from Youngstown, Ohio, this is the MV Red Podcast, the show where we talk about news and politics impacting the Mahoning Valley, the state of Ohio, and the USA. If you want to subscribe to our podcast, find us on your favorite podcast streaming app or visit our website, www.mvred.com. If you want to share your opinion with us, please email info@mvred.com, as we would love to hear from you. Now, let's get things started. Here are your hosts, Michael Metzinger and Dane Davis.
That intro always cracks me up. It's like a beach theme. You know, it's kind of like
I was
tropical. Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. Wow. Well, speaking of tropical, we got three tropical people on here, Michael.
Yes. Welcome everyone.
Sure, it's warm like it's tropical.
Yeah.
You're right about. Welcome everyone. I butchered the title of this. This should be episode 36. Episode 35 was with Joe Blystone. This is episode 36 of the MV Red Podcast. We're back from the dead. We had a two-month little sabbatical there. We took. Illness swept the Metzinger and Davis household, so we're back and ready to go. And we have a big show ahead. Not only are we thrilled to be joined by Taylor Armstrong, president of the Ohio College Republicans, we're also going to be talking about the Tuesday, May 3rd primary, which is coming up next week. We're going to talk a little bit about those big Republican races and offer our predictions for that. So before we get into learning a little bit more about Taylor, want to check in on Dane, see how you're doing.
Me.
Yeah.
I have COVID.
Yes.
My wife has COVID. My kids, we believe, have COVID. We didn't test them, but it's assumed. I'm getting over it, but I have a cough. I have a lingering cough. It's like an infection right here. Like I'm over COVID, but this cough just continues. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but send me your COVID tips. If you guys know how to get rid of the COVID cough, it's pretty bad. COVID's
so what
not
strain
a joke.
do you have?
I don't know. Where do you go to find out what strain? Like, here's what happened to me. I didn't lose my taste. I didn't lose my smell. It started with a really bad headache, and I was lightheaded, and I got really dizzy when I stood up. Like, I had trouble, and then I had difficulty breathing. And now I have this cough. I really didn't have much of a fever. Wasn't really runny nose or cold or anything like that. It was more respiratory. So it sounds like it was an older strain of COVID, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully you and your wife and everybody recover from it, and you lose that nasty cough you had on the phone with me earlier today, because it didn't sound too good.
Well, thank you, first of all. That's very kind. Keep in mind, I was in downtown Cleveland, which isn't exactly the cleanest area, right? This is what I love. I'm going to go on a rant, and I apologize, but the Democrats will be like, look, there are all these problems, racism and inequality and inequity, right? And you look at the areas that they govern, and they can't even clean the feces off the street. And you get assaulted by homeless people. Like, to me, you have, is it Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And to me, there should be the hierarchy of government functions. And the most basic government function is get the shit off of the streets, okay? And democratic cities can't even do that. So where are all the tax dollars going? To me, I think the response to every Democratic politician, like Nan Whaley, gets up there, be like, hey, Nan, why is it in democratic cities there's shit on the street and you get assaulted by homeless people and shot? Like, go to downtown Cleveland, right? It's filthy. It's disgusting. Go to Geauga County. We're a bunch of rural redneck Republicans over here, but the streets are clean and the roads are paved and it's a functioning society. I don't get it. I don't know. Sorry.
Dane's always good for a few of those rants each episode. Yeah. So we're thrilled, like I said earlier, to be joined by Taylor Armstrong, president of Ohio College Republicans. So Taylor, first, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you go to college, and kind of how you got involved with College Republicans. Oh boy, we just lost them.
We did.
Just lost them.
Oh,
Am I
there it
back?
is.
There
Yeah,
we
you're
go.
back.
There we go. All right. I don't know if you heard
College
my question.
Wi-Fi. Don't you love this?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you became involved with College Republicans.
Yeah, the silver lining is I never planned to be in this position per se, in multiple different ways. In both my time as a chapter chair at Miami, and then even the time when I was recruited to be the vice chair of the OCRF, previous to having been appointed, or I shouldn't say appointed, having to constitutionally succeed David Kalka, who was my predecessor in the position.
Oh,
It was,
yeah. I know David. Yeah.
I'm sure you do. Yep. He's now working for Dave Joyce out of Lake County now, and doing good work for him. Very close with Dave. The two Daves, as you call it, Dave and Dave, and he's doing good work. I think he's probably one of the youngest campaign managers in the country right now for a congressional campaign, and Gomez, I believe, and John Gomez, who is also a former CR UD guy for Steve Shabbat. But David and I knew each other in high school a little bit. We had crossed paths when Mike DeWine at the time was the Attorney General, and I was recruited by my high school to serve on this, what they called the Teen Ambassador Board at the time. And they wanted at least one person from each county to serve on it, and they couldn't get anyone from Champaign County. So my high school principal came to me knowing that I was pretty politically active and involved. She's like, hey, why don't you look into this? I did. Ended up going to a couple of their events. David and I met there, didn't talk to each other, didn't really connect until about, I don't know, a year or two later, which I would have been a sophomore here at Miami. And he was like, hey, are you going to the ORP state dinner that they would have? And I was like, yeah.
They have a
we
dinner?
should. Yeah, they used to have a dinner. I mean, it was the fall of 2019, right before COVID hit. Timken was still the chair, and they don't do that anymore. I don't know why, but they don't do it anymore. At least they had a Christmas thing though, I think, this past year. But they used to have a dinner, and he and I connected, and that's where he asked if I would be interested in running as his vice chair with him on his, because it's a ticket. You take the OCRF chair and vice chair has to run as a ticket. And at first I kind of said, I was like, no, I'm trying to kind of wean my way into things. I was pretty, busy and leadership wise in high school. I just kind of want to enjoy my college experience. So he's like, well, give it some thought and get back with me. And during that time, I was also being pushed to run for chapter chair here at Miami for the College Republican chapter here. And a buddy of mine who is now the current chair of the CRs for Miami said, you need to do it. And sure enough, I said, okay, I guess I'll do it. And I did for both. I made a decision for both. I said, I'll run for chapter chair for Miami and I'll join on David's ticket. We ended up having COVID. The elections turned virtual, obviously, this new Zoom concept, kind of streaming concept. And within 3 weeks, I was elected chapter chair of the Miami University College Republicans and the vice chair of the Ohio College Republican Federation, none of which I had planned or had even had aspirations to get into. Wow. It was complete by ask and by chance. And then David had to resign last semester because he was graduating early from Ohio State. Got a job with Dave Joyce running his campaign and gave me a phone call about August, September and said, hey, I'm going to graduate in December. And I said, oh, okay, congratulations. And then I went, wait, if you graduate in December, you can't finish your term. Well, yeah, you're going to have to finish out the term as the state chair for the rest of the school year. So I was like, I'm like, okay, this is awesome. He's like, you'll do fine. And, it was a good time, good experience, but that's kind of the chain of events that kind of led me by complete chance and by happenstance, I would say, that I got into this position. And I think it worked out for the better.
So you got it. I think as chair, your first move should be to retitle your position and be like the grand potentate of the College Republicans.
That's right.
The superior leader of the College Republican. Go over the top. Why not? Right.
The poobah. Yeah.
The poobah. Right. Yeah. Chair is just kind of like, but you just go all out. You know, why not, right?
Yeah, the executive president or the
Yeah, I like that one. The
Supreme
executive-
Chancellor. Supreme
Yes,
Chancellor.
the Supreme Chancellor.
I'm
That's
a
pretty
big Star
cool.
Wars guy. I like that.
Me too. So I have a lot of questions about college
Yeah.
Republicans, but I'm in the Young Republican chapter.
Okay, nice. Tori is an alum, my counterpart with the Ohio Young Republicans. So Miami's kind of like taking over the scene right now. DeWine's, current governor, he's an alum. So we're kind of milking that as much as we can.
So I didn't know. Dwight went to Miami of Ohio.
He did. Class of '69, and Fran
Okay.
as well, the first lady. So she graduated, I think, a couple years after him.
Did not know.
Yeah,
That's
Miami mergers. So
wow.
high school sweethearts, both went to Miami together. Several of their kids obviously went to Miami. So their grandkids still do, and some of them have graduated. I think Matt's in Lordstown right now. I think.
Does he works at Lordstown Motors? I think.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
he
I have
does.
a cousin out
And
there. That's what I thought I had heard.
So how does it work? So each college has a chapter, right? And then
Yeah.
is there like a council for the state, or what would you call that? Like a senate? A committee? What? How does it? What's the? Here's you're at the top, right? You're the Supreme Chancellor, and then you've got the college chapters. How do I get from you to the peons?
Yeah, the way I explain it is it's very similar to how the Republican Party is structured on a regional basis. So you have your county parties, and then you have your state parties, and then you have your national committee or the national party. And the same thing applies to college Republicans to an extent, just in a different kind of way. So each college doesn't necessarily automatically have a chapter; they have to be chartered by the state organization. But for shits and giggles, let's just say every college who wants one can have a college Republican chapter, and then they elect an executive board of which consists of a chapter chair or president, and each of those chapter chairs or presidents compile the state board of chairs, which is directly the voting body of the state organization, which in this case would be the Ohio College Republican Federation. And then they elect the state executive board, which manages everything at the state level, and also manages relationships with other states and their counterparts. So Michigan has a federation of college Republicans, Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and then they divide us by regions. And then you have the College Republican National Committee, and each statewide chair elects a national chair to represent them at the national level. Kind of a thing. So there is no central committee kind of a thing. That's the only kind of distinction. But the chapter chairs at both the college campus, state level, are the voting bodies and the voting blocks, respectively, for each of their direct organizations. So college campuses report directly to the state, and myself, I report directly to the College Republican National Committee with my counterparts in all 50 states. To Courtney Britt, who is our national chairman in Washington, D.C.
Let me ask, I got two follow-up questions. That's interesting how it works. Question one is, how many chapters are there in the state of Ohio, right? Which I imagine it's a pretty good state nationally because we have a lot of colleges in Ohio.
Yes.
And then number two is what does a college Republican do? Like what, I know that sounds like a dumb question, but like, what do you guys do? What makes it like, what is the purpose of it? So how many in Ohio and what do you guys do?
We have 21 active chapters right now. We had about 30 going into the pandemic, and it eliminated about 9 chapters, I would say. 2 of them have come back, Cedarville and I believe John Carroll or Cleveland State, one of the 2. They were, some others, we lost like Ohio Christian, we lost Muskegon, we lost Ohio Wesleyan. And a lot of these chapters were very loosely organized. They were very
not
small.
Ohio Wesleyan. I know somebody.
Yeah. And what happened is obviously with COVID, they just died off. They lost members and they don't really meet. There's no leadership anymore because of Zoom University, frankly. You can't really meet in person. And these folks didn't have the resources or the infrastructure to to barely survive when things were in person and pre-COVID to an extent. But to your second question, what is a college Republican? It's actually pretty wide scale. You have multiple different college Republicans. I say you have your social CRs, as we call them, who are not poli-sci or not. They're pretty. They're politically involved, or I shouldn't say involved, engaged with what's going on. Whether it be watching the Fox News, scrolling through Twitter, following those buzz accounts, but they aren't necessarily wanting to do anything in politics past college or in their livelihood. So these are usually folks who are outside like the political science realm, the hackeries of the industry. And then you have college Republicans who are very politically active, who want to pursue politics, public service, government, even after when they graduate college, running campaigns, working on campaigns, even becoming someday down the road, usually an elected official themselves and making impacts and changes within their local communities, their states, or wherever they're from. Those are two of the biggest types of Republicans you'll get. You'll get the social Republicans who just want like-minded people to talk to on a college campus. Because let's face it, we are a endangered species, as I tell folks on college campuses. And it's the divide is unbelievable in terms of how much we are outnumbered on these campuses, private and public. And I'll make that too. This isn't just public universities. You can have a CR chapter. You can have private universities as well, charter Republican college Republican chapters. But yeah, those social CRs and then engaged CRs, as I put it, the more folks who are more willing to probably work for a campaign, those door knocking, phone banking folks, and who might see a long-term career or path into politics, whether it be campaign or on the professional office side of things, working for an elected official, or even being one down the road when they get of age and experience per se.
You guys serve an important role on college campuses. Like you said, you're outnumbered, and without there being that, I hate to call it alternative voice, but having that balance of thought and opinion on a campus, it would be scary to know how many people we would lose in the course of 3 to 5 years of somebody going to college and maybe starting out thinking they lean right and then leaving as a bleeding heart liberal or as a progressive, whatever the new that's like the old school version, bleeding heart liberal. Now it's progressive, whatever the hipster word is.
Blue hair.
Now it's blue hair. Yeah, it's gender fluid, queer, there Z something or other, right? Now, like, you don't just change your opinion on the minimum wage; you change your gender. You just,
I mean, he's right. I mean, I run a radio show on my own at Miami through the student-run radio, and they had to call me into a meeting because I did a show about the whole gender debate and how the surgery, I don't know what you call it, the gender transfer surgery, let's just put it that way, are being offered to kids of all ages. And I'm like, if these people can't represent themselves in court as legal adults, then what makes you think they are capable of making a decision of biologically and physically changing who they are to an extent? And they brought me in. They're like, you can't say that. I was like, what do you mean I can't say that? I'm like, are you disagreeing? That's a bad thing? No, but people have other opinions, and it's as they put it, it's a threat to their existence. And I'm like, so dissent now all of a sudden automatically refers to danger, kind of a thing. And they're like, well, and it's not a scientific fact. There are just two genders. I said, I'm sorry. What did you just say? They're like, there is a spectrum. I said, there's a spectrum. So there's a gray area between male and female. Even if you're going from one to another, which, I don't judge, but at the same time, there's that gray area. These are the types of things that exist and permeate on college campuses, both public and private. And it's not just here in Ohio, it's across the US. And I tell folks all the time, the greatest battleground for sanity, common sense, the conservative movement, and for America itself are on college campuses and universities across this country, because what they're espousing and then what they're allowing to be considered, normal or just common sense it's egregious. And it just an average individual would just sit there and be like, damn, that is some of the craziest stuff I've ever heard in my life.
It comes back to they have this weird fascination with sexualizing children and coming after children. And the reality, you put it very well, if you can consent to a sex change or to delay puberty,
Yeah.
you logically can also consent to sex itself, right?
Yeah.
If I can consent to change my sex, I can also consent to sex. So by eliminating that one barrier on sex change, they've also eliminated the barrier on sexual relations with children. They weaken it. I don't know if you ever saw the video. There's this little kid called Desmond is Amazing, and he was like 9 years old. Look it up. This is just shows you how messed up as a society we are. He's a 9-year-old little boy, and they're taking him to drag shows, and there are grown adults dressed up like women throwing money at him, and he's 9. And you look at the little boy and you're like, there's something seriously wrong with this kid. And then they took him on Good Morning America, and they had him prance up and down in a sexually suggestive way. It's a 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid.
Right.
It's so creepy, and it's disgusting. And listen, you're a young guy. I appreciate you, first of all. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
And I'm serious, because I have kids. Michael has kids. And you don't even have kids. You don't even know the half of it. Like, if you feel this way now, God bless you, because when you have children of your own, you're going to even change more. You're going to be like, get these freaks away from my children, right? At the end of the day. And that's what it is. And it's the libertarian notion of like, well, let everybody do their thing. I think that's where everybody started out, but it's like that's gone, because now they're trying to sexualize children. Sorry, I went on a rant. Michael, you probably have a better question, but you feel the same way, Michael. I know you do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
I guess my next question is, so in terms of college Republicans and the different role the chapters play on different campuses, do they put on events? Do they campaign on behalf of candidates? What type of work goes into being a member, and what do the chapters do to help grow the Republican Party statewide?
Well, I tell folks our bread and butter is making sure Republicans who share our values, obviously as fellow Republicans, get elected across the board, whether it be the local school board in Oxford, Ohio, where Miami's at, or Butler County at the county level, or state rep, state senator, U.S. congressman. At all levels, we're supporting candidates, and we are so darn fortunate to have a reputation in Ohio where campaigns and elected officials most of the time are personally calling these chapters and saying, we would love to have your help. How can we get you involved? And it's a testament to the work that college Republican chapters in Ohio do, and really what the brand of being a college Republican is all about at the national scene. We have a long history of being the front lines for a lot of folks, whether it be Reagan in the 80s. Karl Rove was just starting out. He was a former chair of the College Republican National Committee. Bob Cupp is a former chair of the OCRF in my spot. And him and Karl Rove were very close, believe it or not, and worked to get a lot of folks across the board elected. So we attend events. We're involved in terms of, from my experience as a chapter chair, we get a lot of invites to like fundraisers for local candidates. And it's usually just an opportunity for us to network, get to meet people in the scene, because that's how this game works. Obviously, it's politics. It's a who you know, and it's a networking type of a thing in order to get your name and your organization out there. We do door knockings, the grassroots oriented kind of thing for candidates, phone banking. We just wrapped one up for the DeWine campaign, and then we just got done one today actually for LaRose at the state level, chapters across the state for Frank LaRose, and then other local campaigns or Senate campaigns who ask help from us to do the same. And then a lot of chapters at the end, we fundraise because our big event is CPAC, the biggest probably
CPAC.
ribbon. Yeah, CPAC is our big thing as college Republicans. That's kind of like our coup de grace kind of a thing. This is where we're going. And it was in Florida in February, and it's typically in DC, but COVID, DC, Fort Pelosi was locked down, so they said, well, we're not doing it there. And Florida was actually much nicer because it was warmer, and there's a little bit more to do than just some crappy river spewing in front of you on National Harbor. But not to say that was cool to go to DC sometimes. But yeah, so we fundraise, and usually the donations we get in return for helping these campaigns help these chapters send their members to CPAC every year to network with like-minded conservatives and fellow college Republicans across the country. And even for us on the more official side of college Republicans, we get to network with our counterparts and get to hear and hang out with them and have a blast. So that's really the bread and butter of what we do, supporting candidates, hosting events to fundraise so that we're able to have a good time and give something to our chapter members in return for their help and their efforts. Because it's tough. I mean, we're college students at the end of the day. We're balancing classes. We're balancing maybe internships, because at the end of the day, we graduate, we hope to get a job and get employed, and balance even other activities that we're involved with on campus. So it's it's definitely a time management activity. It requires a lot of that, but I think it's the best way to learn how to do it if you're in college, because of just how the cycle of politics works in terms of odd hours and working on a Saturday, knocking doors, or taking an hour or two during the workday to phone bank, and so on and so forth. But that's really what we do well.
Yeah, you guys are the grunts of a lot of campaigns. Like you're the and I don't mean that in an insulting way, but like
right.
You're like the bread and butter. Like you guys are the guys that do this task that nobody wants to do.
Yep.
And that's really helpful, because everybody wants to be the guy that gives the speech, or is the campaign manager, and nobody wants to be the guy that's
right,
checking tickets or something like that. But we need those people to do stuff. So I appreciate that. I didn't have the courage to be a college Republican. I think I went to a couple of their meetings, but I wasn't formally involved or anything like that. But I always here's my question for you. Is it tough on campuses from the fellow students and from the professors to be a conservative or independent or a dissident or to dissent or any of that? Like, do people come after you? How hard is that? What's it like?
Yeah, it's I'd be lying to folks if I said it was all fairy tales and pixie sticks with everyone treats us nice and there, unfortunately, it's just not the case. We are in the minority in some regards. Now I speak to Miami. We're a little bit more fortunate because I think our student body has a bigger concentration of conservative students than typical other institutions, especially in the state of Ohio. I mean, Ohio State is absolutely egregious in terms of how outnumbered they are, and it shows. And even recently, we've had a situation. We were talking about the sexualization of children. HB 616 is obviously a big kind of talking point right now, and if I assume you guys have read up on it a little bit, but that the idea that we're not going to introduce sexual content or curriculum to anybody K through 12 or at certain grade levels, the fact that that's controversial, and we as a college Republican chapter took a stance on it, saying, well, yeah, we kind of agree with that, and we would hope everyone with common sense would follow suit in that. And there have been bias reports filed to the university, and yes, that is a thing, a bias report, claiming that we have threatened the gay and LGBTQ alphabet soup community, and I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just, and that's another the tags.
How many letters are there? I don't know.
Well, and that's the thing. Why do we have to label these things? I mean, just say, and they're like, just say gay. I'm like, yes, thank you. I mean, that used to be okay. Now you have to say Latinx and the alphabet soup of folks, and I'm like, Jesus God, how do you just call just people? But anyway, yeah, I mean, you've got administration who are reaching out to us, and it's their job. They have to. They're like, hey, we've got people who have expressed concerns that your stance on this has been, very hostile and threatening and disrespectful. And we're like, we're not threatening anybody, because Supreme Court says free speech is free speech until you're threatening violence and you're threatening people's way of life and so on and so forth. We didn't do any of that. We expressed an opinion. But because that opinion isn't popular, that for some reason it's not considered to be mainstream, we're automatically dogged for it, kind of a thing. And it's frustrating for a college conservative, because all of us here can just sit here and like, two genders, duh. But to some of these folks on college campuses, it's like, no, there's a spectrum, and you need to get educated, and you need to check your privilege, kind of a thing. And I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, it's
sorry.
ridiculous. No,
Yeah.
go ahead.
There's a big, I think, a class element to this. And you get a lot of college students, and mommy and daddy are paying for everything, and they feel very guilty about it.
Uh-huh.
And so they become social justice warriors as a way of like dealing with their own guilt for being useless. And the campus that I hope gets shut down, or a tornado comes and wipes out, is Oberlin. Okay. I don't know if you saw it. Oberlin is a horrible school. It's a horrible school, and the administration is horrible, because I don't know if you saw, there was this case. Are any of you guys following this? There was this case in Oberlin where there was a shop in the town, and a couple Oberlin kids came and they were stealing from there. And the shop owner was like, hey, these kids are stealing from us. And Oberlin, not only the students, but the administration were like, these guys are racist. Let's shut them down. This is a racist store. And they were handing out flyers. It's not about free speech, okay? The school administrations were printing, the officials were printing out flyers claiming that this little shop was racist, and that's libel because they weren't. And they got sued and they lost, and now they have to pay like $100 million to these owners. Awesome, in my opinion. I think we need to, this is what I struggle with. How are we going to take back the college campuses? Like, I think we need to start sending in like tanks into the college campuses and just crack down on the professors and like give them a choice between like being exiled, right? And that's basically their only choice, because it's not like they're teaching real stuff, right? It's not even like Marxist theory where it takes a lot of thought, or like reading Das Kapital, right? It's bullshit, and they're charging people $60,000 for it. Yeah,
and I, I talking to and even like-minded administrators, they, in private conversations, they have alluded, the argument higher ed makes, it's like, well, if, because my thing is just target the pocketbook, especially if these are public institutions, they are taxpayer funded. Might just say the state, the GA just says, if you're teaching this BS, you're not getting a dime of taxpayer dollars to fund it. Yes. And then they're like, well, then we can't use taxpayer dollars to help support, the local or the campus college Republican chapter, because taxpayer dollars are used because they're a student organization technically. And it is true, we do use university dollars to host events sometimes, but because they kind of have to, to an extent, it's taxpayer dollars. But I think the biggest solution to combating this insanity on college campuses and universities is speaking out against it and making, frankly, their lives miserable about taking some of these stances, and making it very clear that this isn't mainstream what they're doing, and because they have oodles of endowments, because they receive they're these impenetrable kind of institutions, and I think it boils down to the ivory tower elitism that exists on a lot of these campuses, where they think that because they are college educated and have PhDs, that they are holier than thou, kind of smarter than the average individual, as we see reflected through the Democrat Party in contemporary times. We need to call these folks out for what they are, and it needs to be a nationwide, a community-wide, a network-wide kind of thing. Because I know these institutions kind of pretty well, having dealt with them from a CR level. They will crack to public pressure very easily, because at the end of the day, these campuses operate in theory, in a free market setting where technically a student doesn't have to go to Oberlin, they don't have to go to Miami, they don't have to Ohio State. So if we tell these folks, hey, there are other options out there, and technically right now there isn't, because no matter where you go, there's probably going to be a liberal campus.
Yeah.
But if we start kind of changing the tide on that, and they realize, oh shoot, we're losing students because of this, that's going to be a huge, huge thing in how they change their behavior and what they choose to promote, I guess, as an institution. And I don't think some of them can see past their own leanings and bias and how that wraps into who they are as, at the end of the day, for some public administrators.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think you're right. I think you're totally on point with this. If you go through they do back down. I think that's the most important point, is that they do back down to public pressure. They're actually hypersensitive to public pressure, and it's only because people have been ignoring this stuff's been happening. And the good news is, I think that people are really waking up. And at the end of the day, it's not about. To me, I'm a very big free speech guy, right? And I've read a lot of books that are extreme left wing and extreme right wing books. So I don't like cracking down on intellectual thought. But there's a difference between that and funding your own destruction as a society, and that's what we're doing. And there's intellectualism, and then there's just the trash that is our modern university.
Right.
Sorry, Michael. I know you got a better question.
I'm looking at the clock here, and I know Taylor's got to run, but I just want to say, first off, I think you're going places. In fact, I know you are.
Yeah.
You're very polished. You're ahead of your time. You're outstanding.
You're too kind.
No, it's well deserved. Trust me. You're going places, and I'm sure you've done. Or Ohio College Republicans has been fortunate to have you leading the way here of late. So, but I know, again, you got to run here. So thank you. I guess before you go, though, you got to give us your predictions for Tuesday. After you're off, Dane and I are going to be talking a little bit more about that. So let's hear your predictions. Governor, Senate, who do you think wins and by how much?
The math is in DeWine's favor. There's no doubt about that. 3 is probably one of the most unlucky numbers you can have in politics, especially when you have 2 candidates polling from a similar narrative base. Both of the Renacci and Blystone camps are disenfactioned with, obviously, DeWine and his leadership. And unfortunately, when they split the vote down to half, with probably a big amount of independents, I expect, to vote for DeWine in the primary, because in Ohio, you have to choose a Republican or Democrat ballot. And in order for you to vote for DeWine, you have to choose that Republican ballot. I'm going to see a lot of probably independents and even center-left people who are disillusioned with their party, maybe throwing their support behind DeWine. And that means good news for him, even in general. So I predicted DeWine win on that. U.S. Senate, that Trump endorsement, obviously, is that the quicksilver bullet, And I would be willing to argue that, there are several instances it has. I think the race itself, the dynamics are a little bit different, because you have 5 candidates, of which have each very unique stances and postures as individuals, and how they've been, as we've heard for weeks and months, how their attachment to Trump, and also who they have been as partisans and as Ohioans involved in the conservative movement as well. It's the top 2, no doubt, are probably right now Vance and Mandel. I was between Vance and Gibbons, but I think the Trump bump in Ohio is real. He won the state by 8 points in 2020, and or was it 4 in 2020 and 8 in 2016? He won basically a good amount of margin in Ohio in both election cycles, especially for us as a swing state. That's kind of unheard of. So I think Vance is going to pull this out with the Trump endorsement, because before the poll was taken at his most recent, I think Fox News had the poll, he's at 23% right now. There was still 39% undecided. The poll taken right before the endorsement was announced by Trafalgar, a good pollster that I trust highly in terms of accuracy. So I think 39% were waiting and betting on a Trump endorsement, and I think a majority of them have thrown their support behind Vance. There's still about 25%, according to Fox News, that are undecided, but they're going to have to make a decision here in the next week, obviously, in terms of who's going to make it out of the primary. But I think Vance is going to win the Senate primary, and I've said this from the beginning. even before the endorsement and me really looking in these candidates, whoever would have won the Republican nomination next Tuesday, I think, in my personal belief, will become the next United States Senator for Ohio. Tim Ryan doesn't stand a snowflake's chance in hell. He's a fraud. He acts like he's this big pro-worker guy. His voting record doesn't reflect it. It's on the docket. He was supportive of Pelosi, this presidential run BS. And you guys know in the Mahoning Valley damn well
we know
his record and what he has done for the area, and that is jack shit, frankly, and zero. And I don't expect him coming to my part of the state or even in Northwest Ohio in God's country trying to convince those folks that he's done anything for them in our small towns, for the farmers and for the blue-collar workers who have just been absolutely raped by terrible policy from the federal level these past 25 years, and he's part of the swamp. And I can't wait to see J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan on a debate stage together, and JD just tearing his jugular out, or a Mike Gibbons, or for God's sake, even a Matt Dolan, I think would be able to one up him on a few things, despite his leanings as a stakeholder of the Cleveland Indians, I should say. But for those of you who are big fans up there, probably plenty in the Mahoning Valley.
Former.
I like the Yankees. I've always liked the Yankees.
Oh, you're a Yankees.
Yeah, I don't support racist teams. That's why I support America's team. No, preach it, brother. I'm with you 100%. Tim Ryan is a frankly disgusting character, but his disgustingness is only outmatched by his mediocrity. He is the color yellow or beige or tan or gray made flesh, right? It's just uninspiring. It's dull. He has all the charisma of a damp rag and all the intelligence of a 3-day-old napkin. He's lame. I don't like Tim Ryan. I do not want green eggs with ham, sir. No Tim Ryan. Okay, well, no, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. Hey, you got a great future, kid. I think you're a good guy.
Well, thank you.
You're a lot of fun, and you got to spread the word of MV Red, and we will spread the word.
Absolutely, and I'm
Taylor
glad
Armstrong,
to join
okay?
even after I move on from this. If you guys ever need a young, fresh, hip guest for the Republican movement, I'm more than happy. So get a hold of me. So
we'll take you up on
invite,
that,
guys.
Yeah,
I promise.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Taylor. Best wishes. And again, if you ever need anything from us, just let us know.
Absolutely. Vote Republican.
That's right. Yeah. Vote Tuesday. All righty. Thank you, Taylor.
Man, you listen to somebody like him, Michael, doesn't it kind of fill you with like hope, or it's like, yeah, right on, man.
He's like we said, he's got a nice future ahead of him. Very polished. He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
He knows the facts. And very impressed with him. And it's good to see youth on a college campus be that knowledgeable on things and be able to take on the liberal establishment of academia.
Yeah, that's awesome. It gets you fired up.
Yeah.
So
go ahead,
Michael. I was just gonna say. So this is the best part of the show for you is the polls, right? We've got two primaries. This is like Michael Metzinger heaven, because if there's one thing you love, it's polling.
Love me some polls.
You love polls. You don't like elections. You don't like politics. You don't like democracy. You don't even like voting. But damn it, you love the polls, right? Am I right?
That is an accurate assessment.
So I'm going to turn it over to you. You tell me the state of the race.
Right,
what is going on? Are we even? Wait, I got a big question. Are we having a primary in Wynn, and what map? And is there a second primary? What is going on, Michael?
So that's a good point. So go back a couple months, or probably the last 3 or 4 months, Ohio Redistricting Committee has been attempting to pass Ohio House, Ohio State Senate maps that have been shot down by the Ohio Supreme Court 4 times now. As a result,
4
times. 4.
Holy cow. Sorry.
Let's do it right. I'm like my son here. When I ask him how old he is, he goes, "You're 2, buddy." Yeah, he shows 4. So shot down 4 times, and as a result, they decided that they were still going to have the primary for all the other offices that are up for grabs, whether, from governor, U.S. Senate, county commissioner, those types of things, all the way down to judges and all of that.
Okay.
As a result, I think I heard today that it's sometime maybe in early August, they're hoping for a second primary. Now, whether that will be an in-person one or if that will be sort of like the whole COVID primary where it was all vote by mail, I don't know that. And quite frankly, we don't necessarily know the maps as of yet. But the latest was, from my understanding, a federal court ruled that if by, I don't know, I want to say within the next 10 days, if there isn't a new set of maps, they're just going to institute the ones that the Republicans on the redistricting committee put into place, the 4th set of maps. And so it certainly seems as though the Republicans on the redistricting committee are kind of dragging their feet on having another hearing and putting another set of maps out, because the federal courts have already pretty much hinted that if there's no new set of maps, the 4th set is what it's going to be. So I kind of think we have our set of maps now. And so it's looking like August is when we're going to actually vote for the Republicans and Democrats, the primary for Ohio State Senate and Ohio House.
Okay.
I might have some of those facts wrong, but I'm pretty sure I got most of them right.
So we have our primary May 3rd.
Oh boy.
What's oh boy? What's oh boy, Michael? Did we drop?
It was a little sluggish there, but continue.
Oh, I'm just saying we have our primary is May 3rd, and it's for the statewide offices, right? And
Correct.
the county-wide offices.
Everything except state house and state senate.
Okay. So there's obviously 2 races, right? The gubernatorial race and the Senate race.
Yes. So
oh, sorry, go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, let's talk about the one that I think we probably would agree. We kind of know the ultimate outcome. It's going to be on the gubernatorial side. I hate that word, by the way.
I hate that word.
Rather call it the governor's race. We're going to call it the governor's race.
Yeah.
On the governor's race, so we have DeWine, Blystone, who we had on our last episode 35, Jim Renacci, and then a guy, now the name of, is it Ron Hood? I think is his name.
Ron Hood, yeah.
Yes. So on that one, now I know we disagree on this one. I'm voting for DeWine, and I kind of laid out my rationale there. He's not my favorite Republican by any stretch of the imagination. I want to emphasize that. And we've criticized him on this show, and I've criticized him on Twitter as well. Hasn't been my favorite governor whatsoever. Obviously, my favorite one's down in Florida. I love DeSantis. He's my man. Mike DeWine is no Ron DeSantis. I'll be the first to admit that. But when we look at the alternatives here, first off, I'm not a fan of Jim Renacci. I think it's kind of clear from the tone of my tweets that I'm just not sold on the guy, and I'm not a big fan of the way he's run his campaign. I think he's got these political whatever, if you want to call them experts or from out of state running the show, and I don't think they've done a really great job. They're just they're trying to like paint him as this ultra Trump candidate, and he doesn't seem to be that kind of guy, and they're trying to paint him in that way. And I'm just not on board with that. And I kind of laid out a few of my issues in my tweets that when I said I was going to support DeWine, whether it be the whole flop of the Mike Lindell endorsement, which, by the way, really meant absolutely nothing. It's just the whole idea. It's still up on his page, but Lindell said he wasn't. And then the whole thing with supposedly illegal immigrants flying into Youngstown, which
that one really bothers you, doesn't it?
It does, because it was a charter airplane, an empty charter airplane that went to pick up the Missouri State football team. Like
the point
is,
I
have a big why issue. Now, I'm not saying that plane or some of that isn't happening elsewhere, and it could be happening in Ohio. But in that specific instance, it's just like, to me, another instance of Youngstown just getting beat down some more. Oh, poor Youngstown taking all these illegal immigrants. But it was they went to pick up a football team. It's like it wasn't even remotely close to the truth, and it kind of bothered me. So I'm voting for DeWine. It's not that I love him by any stretch of the imagination. Honestly, I would have preferred somebody like Bernie Moreno, for instance. I think he could have been a good governor candidate. There's a few others that I think could have been a good one. But in terms of Renacci, not on board with him. And Blystone, I think he's an authentic guy, but you're running for the become the governor of the seventh largest state. And I question the experience when it comes to especially like economic development and policies like that, if he really has that experience to take that on. I think Renacci could handle that. I don't necessarily think Blystone can, but that's enough of me venting. I want to hear your thoughts, Dane, because I know we disagree on this one.
Yeah, so first, I think that DeWine is going to win. Look, the reality is DeWine is the majority of Republicans in the state of Ohio do not want DeWine to be their candidate. But there are two candidates running against DeWine, two candidates of sizable.
Yeah.
Blystone and Renacci. And because those two have been in a pissing match and they one of them couldn't have stepped aside to let the other go through, they're going to split the vote and DeWine is going to win. And then DeWine, I think, will likely win re-election in the general against Nan Whaley. So that's my take of the race. I think there's a good chance that Blystone, maybe if he didn't directly do this, because I don't want to impugn him, but that he is getting backdoor support from DeWine, because Renacci had the support and organization to take him down. Blystone comes on the scene. He's ran a damn good campaign, I will say that. But now DeWine looks like he's gonna win. I definitely think Ron Hood, who's pulling around like 3-4%, I think he's being set up by the DeWine people. But
I could see the Hood one.
I could see the Hood one. You know what? And look, I don't want to insult the Blystone campaign. I take that back. I think it's the Hood campaign. I think the Blystone is a genuine campaign. But I think there may be DeWine supporters who have donated to Blystone to keep him going, to keep him in the race. I wish he and Renacci. What's that?
I think there's probably some validity to that.
Yeah, I wish he and Renacci would come to an agreement. Look, I think though when you look at DeWine's record, Michael, this is what I don't understand. During COVID-19, he shut down the state of Ohio. Okay, and looking back, was that necessary given what somebody like a DeSantis or even an Abbott who shut it down but quickly opened it back up, and even in Georgia where they shut it down quickly opened it back up, it wasn't necessary, right? There was a lot of damage done. Now, maybe you could forgive him for making the decision initially, but the slowness with which he restarted things was lagging other states, and I don't think there was any benefit to that. I was
very critical of him on was
you were, yeah,
and I agree with you. I think obviously hindsight 2020. It's easy to say that now. I think at the time he tried to make the decision that he thought was in the best interest of the state while trying to have a juggling act. They're trying to have some balance where you don't take nearly as extreme as a Michigan or a New York or a California, but perhaps obviously not as we'll say free as Florida. But I agree. I think that probably to me, along with the whole postponing or suspending the primary, the sluggishness of lifting those restrictions to me really kind of, I think he could have done it a month or two earlier.
Yeah.
He could have probably bought himself a little bit more political capital. I think he delayed himself, but he at least did it. And I was a little concerned there when he finally opened it up. It was about May of 2021, about a year ago.
Yeah, so. But Michael, you made this point. He only did it after the legislature passed a bill essentially giving themselves the power to overrun his orders. So, would he have done that had they not done that? I don't know. It's a hypothetical, but
and that's something else we've discussed on the show, and I've said, I honestly think DeWine has benefited from that piece of legislation that limited his powers, because I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if he would have tried, especially I would say in the fall when cases really surged. What was that? Probably right around Black Friday, I think it was, is when the whole Omicron thing came about.
Right.
And because his hands were tied, he couldn't do anything. And it made him sort of look like, oh, I'm governing like a Republican you want me to govern. But deep down, who knows what his true intent, what he may have wanted to do. But I think that kind of benefited him was his hands were tied.
Yeah.
And you know what? He could kind of stay out of it. He didn't need to do his damn daily press conference to go over the COVID numbers every day.
Well, and then so these are my two big points on DeWine. Point number one is I think that we need bolder leadership in Ohio. I think Ohio is economically falling behind. If you look in states like Indiana, even a Kentucky or a Tennessee are doing very well. You could even make the case that like Wisconsin is kind of economically leapfrogging Ohio. So I think we need really bold reform. And I don't think Mike DeWine has given us that much reform. He's moderately cut taxes, but he's massively increased spending. Partially, even prior to the COVID bump in revenues, he was increasing spending, and he's expanding the government in a lot of different areas, which I think is unnecessary. And I think the results are not going to really bear out. So I think economically we need bold vision, and I think somebody like Renacci offers that chance. But the thing that really scares me, and this is point two, is at the end of the day, I don't trust DeWine no longer facing the ballot box. And what I mean by that is going to the point you just made. Once he's no longer facing re-election, like I think he signed the constitutional carry bill not because he wanted to, but he needed to, or he'd get destroyed in the primary. Once he gets reelected and he's no longer facing reelection, he will, to quote Barack Obama, be like unrestrained or unleashed, right? And I don't know what type of governor that is. I don't know what we get. I think we either get nothing, right? Stagnation is just placeholder, which is not what Ohio needs. I think he veers to the left, right? And starts appointing kind of like center leftists in a lot of positions, which is, again, not what Ohio needs. And I think that there's basically like a 10 to 15% chance he goes further to the right, right? Like, why would he do that? So to me, that's the doomsday scenario, and that's why I would not want somebody like DeWine in there again. Now, do I think the state's going to fall apart if he gets reelected? No. And am I going to vote for him in the general? Yes. I think he's a better candidate than Nan Whaley. I just think we've got opportunity. I think Renacci's run a decent campaign. There have been some missteps. He shouldn't have ran for senator. He should have ran for governor the entire time. Like this is clearly where his heart is. And I'm like a kind of a reluctant Renacci guy, right? I think he'd be I think there's a decent chance that we get something different with Renacci. And I know he's not.
I agree.
You know, I know he's not going to lock us down again. And DeWine, I'm not sure. Well, I guess he can't now because of the legislature, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I do want to mention, I supported Renacci in 2018, and at the time I thought he was a decent guy. And I don't think he ran a great campaign, and he did lose by 7 points statewide, and is still an R+8 state. It's just I haven't been thrilled with his style of his campaign. Again, I question the how authentic he is. I think he's got these outside experts or whatever you want to call them, consultants running his campaign, and I just think the way he's kind of painting himself to be this Trump guy, when I don't really view him as that kind of guy. If you really get down to it, I think that's my greatest issue with him. But I would support him, obviously, against any of the Democrats, and I think he would definitely have some different takes on some things. And he is a CPA like myself, so he understands. He's a CPA, and I know he owned a business. So from that perspective, I agree with you there. But when it comes to DeWine, I guess 2 points. One, that is the big question. I guess my thought is it could come down to really what kind of margin he gets and what number he's at. I have on our spreadsheet here where I'm throwing out a kind of a prediction where I kind of have DeWine at 47, Blystone and Renacci around 25 each, and Hood at 3. I might be a little high on DeWine, but I'm kind of factoring in this whole idea of course, sort of like Taylor mentioned, independents and some crossover Democrats coming to his aid. But if that number is in the lower 40s, I think he's got to really realize, like, hey, you lucked out. You lucked out having two, a Blystone and Renacci, who, unfortunately for the Renacci folks, once Blystone polled very tight in that Trafalgar poll, there was not a chance in hell that Blystone was going to back out. And then the other factor is the fact that Donald Trump hasn't touched this race whatsoever. And I think that says a lot about Renacci. I think and one thing is, where Trump's gone after Kemp, he's really never gone after DeWine. I think the worst he's ever said was it'll be an interesting primary next year for Ohio governor or something to that effect. I don't know the exact tweet. He's just never really gone after DeWine, who was his co-chair in Ohio in 2020.
So can I make a crucial point here, Michael? Trump wasn't a big anti-lockdown guy. This is kind of like if you really look at Trump initiated the lockdown.
He encouraged
them, right?
Yes.
He was a big vax guy.
And he still is heavily touting it.
So he's not a DeSantis, right? There's a bit of a cleavage in the party between the Trump people and then the DeSantis Trump people, right? And they're different camps. They're similar. And if you're zoomed out, they look the same. But when you take that microscope and you start to look in, and you're like, hey, these are different types of Republicans, right? So yeah, that's a very good point. I don't think Trump. I think Trump thinks Renacci's a loser.
I agree. I think he wants to endorse him because
he thinks he's a loser.
Pissed off at 2018 because
even
say all you want about DeWine, he did win by 4 in a race that he was polling behind Cordray, right? Richard Cordray was the Democrat, and DeWine ended up winning by 4 that year, and Renacci ended up losing by 6 or 7. And I think Trump was pretty pissed because Trump did endorse him. It wasn't actively campaigning for him, but again, the state went to Trump by 8 points in 2016 and 2020. It's not like the state just magically went Democrat for a cycle. It was a race that I think Trump views as though we should have won, and it wasn't really that close considering, where the state is right now.
Agreed. I totally agree. So yeah, I think DeWine wins. I think, I disagree. So wait, your prediction, you have 147, 25, 25, 3 for Hood.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go, I think it's DeWine 45. Hold on, let me make sure my math works. Okay, I think it's DeWine 45. I think Renacci is 30. I think Renacci's 35, actually.
Wow. My next question was going to be, do you think Blystone could beat Renacci?
Blystone, to me, is at 18.
Okay.
And then this Hood guy is at 2.
Interesting.
So
you're pretty high on Renacci's numbers compared to Blystone. You have him almost doubled up compared to a lot of the polling out there, right? Why is that?
A couple reasons. Renacci has a better infrastructure to get people out to vote. I think I've seen it. I think Blystone has passionate supporters and grassroots, but I just don't see those people turning out at the polling box. To me, they're like the Ron Paul people, and I was a Ron Paul guy, very active. They're going to put his signs everywhere, but they're 10% of the party or 15% of the party on a good day. I think that's the same with the Blystone people. I think he gets 18%, 15 to 20, call it 18. I just don't think those are people that turn out in mass. I think they're vocal. I think they're loud. I don't think they turn out. I think they're Renacci people. I think he's got a much more of a machine and much more of a base of support in Cleveland and Youngstown, and in that Northeast Ohio area. Those people tend to vote. I think he turns out. I think DeWine still gets it at 45%, but I don't think DeWine gets a majority, crucially. So we'll see. You can save these, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, these will all be up on the podcast. I do want to share my screen real quick. It's let me see here if I could get this to work correctly. This is Ryan Brune, who's he does a lot of good political stuff with Ohio politics on Twitter, and so he put out this tweet earlier today, and I tend to agree with him. This is kind of his idea of where he thinks DeWine versus Renacci versus Blystone, where their strengths are going to be, and I tend to agree. I kind of view Appalachia, we'll call it, as Blystone country, and he actually thinks. I think from reading this, he actually has Blystone winning a lot of these counties, and then these light pink counties would be where DeWine wins them, but just with a plurality of vote. And then he says that the solid red counties are counties where DeWine gets 50% plus. And and this obviously is a first stab. I would tend to agree about Appalachia. I guess my question is, where do you and you just may have mentioned it, where do you think Renacci has a chance to win some counties? Where's Medina is his home, so I'd imagine there, but where else?
I think he wins the light pink counties. Like on your little map, I think the red go DeWine. I think the light pink go Renacci. And, in tight margins, right? But then I think the gray go Blystone.
I would say one thing on this map to watch for. I think DeWine runs it up in a big way in Franklin and Delaware counties. That is I would say, especially Delaware, the suburban type Republican voter that maybe isn't a big fan of Trump, but still might align themselves with the Republican Party. I think that's where DeWine's going to run up his numbers big. I'll say locally, I haven't seen a single DeWine sign. I've seen a ton of Blystone and a handful of Renacci. So I really don't have a good pulse as to how the Mahoning Valley is going to go. Being that it went for Trump, I don't think this is DeWine country at all. I don't know. I could see a path, kind of how you're saying with Renacci here. Nothing. Honestly, anything would surprise me on Tuesday with that. I'll be curious to see how this map compares to the ultimate results. But I think if there's a part of the state where Blystone's going to do well and has a chance of winning some counties, it would be down there in southeastern Ohio. Any of those counties really along the river. So we'll see on that. So again, I'm 47, 25, 25, 3. You're DeWine 45, Blystone 18, Renacci 35, and Hood 2. So we'll see on that. I wouldn't be surprised if Blystone ekes out past Renacci. That's just me. Obviously, you have a different perspective on things. So
yeah, I think you're too much in Appalachia, and I'm in the city. I'm in the Cleveland suburbs. He's got a lot of So we'll see. What about the Senate race? What's going on in the Senate race?
And this is one I really haven't paid as much of attention to. It seems like a lot of the folks covering politics in Ohio have been focusing on this U.S. Senate race because there's been 7 candidates, 5 bigger candidates who have been at various points in time have been high up, 1 or 2 in the polls. And Trump actually, 2 weeks ago, leading up to Easter, endorsed J.D. Vance. And so I've been kind of following this one a lot closer as of late. And I posted on our Twitter account that I'm still a little undecided on here. I'm kind of between Vance and Dolan, which might surprise some people because I 3 months ago I would have told you there wasn't a chance in hell I'd vote for Dolan, but kind of after watching the debates and seeing how some of these other candidates handled themselves, I've kind of narrowed it down to Vance and Dolan. I'm still not real sure which way I'm going to go. One thing's for sure, during this whole process, I've been anti-Mandel from the start because of, again, the way he has approached this campaign and the fact that he was non-existent during the Trump administration. He kind of was just missing. And then he just comes out of nowhere, way too aggressive for my liking. And I certainly hope Mandel doesn't get it. And we'll share our numbers here in a second. I know a Fox News poll came out today where it showed Vance kind of getting a bigger lead and coming ahead, but I think it's still kind of tight. And I don't know where I'm going to go yet, but it'll be an interesting race.
So let me go through each of these candidates. I'm going to start at the end. Neil Patel came to the Geauga County Lincoln Day. Seems like a nice enough guy. He's just going to get 1% of the vote. Pukita, I think, has a very loyal group of supporters. I don't think he is going to break 5%, though. I think he'll get 3%. I think
Bruce Bozelli, who's tuning in, tends to agree with you. He says he has a path.
I don't think he has a path.
Bruce has been a big Pukita guy. He follows our Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, Bruce, no offense. Guy. I don't think Pukita is going to do it. He doesn't have I don't think there's a path. I'm sorry. I think, could he be a force in Ohio politics down the road? Yes. I think
the problem for him was so many candidates. I don't think his messaging was bad. I just think he got overshadowed by the other candidates with who had the money and the resources to kind of quiet him down.
Agreed.
Or overshadow him, that is.
Yeah. Next is Timken. To me, she gets like 8%. Timken is an interesting figure. I think Timken is a very competent organizer. I think she's an intelligent woman. Part of me respects her, but I think she is lacking charisma. The people that support Timken are like your county chairs. I know our county chair is a big
Johnson
Timken. It's
Columbiana.
your insider. She's the Ohio establishment. Now she's like a pro-Trump establishment, but still the establishment. I think she's kind of like the Hillary Clinton of this campaign. Now, I'm not saying that because she's a woman, but just because she's someone that is like an intelligent person, but maybe doesn't have all the charisma. I think she gets 8%. Another big problem with Timken is that her husband was like outsourcing jobs, right? So like you benefited from marrying a very wealthy man, but that man made his wealth harming America's industry. Now that's fine if you want to live a private life, but if you want to live a public life and represent Ohio, to me that raises larger questions. Again, I would support Timken in some other role, not for Senate. So next is Gibbons. Gibbons, I think it was at one point the leader. I think Gibbons managed to get the Tea Party people or the conservative voters who did not like Mandel, but were kind of like the traditional conservatives. The problem with Gibbons is he melted down recently because, one, he didn't get the Trump endorsement. Trump was rumored to like call him a bag of mashed potatoes. I didn't say that. That's Trump. So he didn't get the Trump endorsement, and then he screwed up on that tax thing. I don't know if you saw where he's like the middle class isn't taxed enough. Now, I think there's a nuanced point there, and I understand what he was trying to make. But when you're a wealthy investment banker who's a millionaire, and you're saying that you're even coming close to the middle class not being taxed enough, it just doesn't work well. Were he more adroit of a politician, I think he could have managed it. He lost a lot of support. So I think he went up. I think he went down. I put Gibbons at around 17%. Let's see where that takes me. Yeah, I think Gibbons comes in at 17%. Mandel, I have at like 22% or something like that. I don't know. I haven't made the math work. I think Josh Mandel is a reprehensible character. And I think he's a reprehensible character not because of his political positions, which I largely agree with. I think he's reprehensible for a couple of reasons. One is he's a Jewish kid from Beechwood who pretends to be a Christian conservative. Now, I do not believe there should be a religious test to hold office. I think that we have patriots of every faith. I think Barry Goldwater was a Jewish American, one of my favorite politicians. So don't let this be construed in any poor way. My point is not that he is a Jewish kid from Beechwood. My point is that he pretends to people that are less sophisticated to be a conservative Baptist Christian, right? Which to me is just not authentic. And he's lying and he's doing that to get the votes. 10 years ago, he was a McCain and Romney Republican. He was a Kasich Republican. And now that Trump is big, he's a Trump Republican, and he didn't even show up, right? The other thing that's really gross is he waves the Bible around. Now, he doesn't believe in the Bible, right? Because he doesn't believe in the New Testament, but he waves it around. And yet he cheated on he's believed to have cheated on his wife. That's why he's divorced with his staffer, right? And there are some really horrible things that I'm not going to repeat on this show about him and his staffer. But let me just say that if 1/10 of them are true, he's not the religious person that he claims to be. To me, it's just phony. It's fake. It's gross. It's bad. Boo, boo, boo. Dolan is an intelligent person, a good administrator, but to me, a fundamentally dated man and kind of a weak man. He bent down on the Cleveland Indians thing, which is lame, and his politics are just not in line with where the Republican Party needs to be. Trump changed the Republican Party for the better. He moved into a more populist direction, and Dolan is kind of this old-fashioned 2004 Bush conservative, right? Which to me, it's like our big issue is not what the capital gains tax rate is, right? It's they're sexualizing our children. Like literally, that's what they're doing. They're pushing, 13-year-olds to get mastectomies where they chop off their breasts. And they have teachers telling them, "Oh, you're confused. Well, you're actually another gender," right? Like this is what's going on. Like we're so far gone into Sodom and Gomorrah This is the big issue. And if the capital gains tax is like 39 versus 37% or 15 versus 25, that doesn't matter, right? And that's kind of like Dolan's shtick. So I think he'd be capable in government. I don't think he's a bad human being. I just think he doesn't get it, right? He doesn't. He's a bougie, wealthy wasp from Sugar Falls. He's not what the times.
I thought you said Dolan was Catholic.
Well, he's a wasp. I thought he might be Catholic. You're right. And that leaves JD Vance. I'm JD Vance. I think a couple of things I like about JD Vance, and I'm biased for him. One is on policy. He's very smart and thoughtful. Okay, not only is he like populist and more Trump than Trump, he's not a neocon, right? He is somebody that has like thought about these issues and it really wants to solve them, right? And he seems to be very much a big policy guy. His big weakness is I think he said too much against Trump. And I think he is Trumpist on policy. So like tariffs. I think JD Vance is a true believer in tariffs. He's not Trumpist in Trump's character. And I think he's kind of putting on that to win the election. So there's a little bit of an authenticity problem there. And I think it's real. It's not going to go away. But I think it's outweighed by the fact that he's thoughtful, he's charismatic, he's well-spoken, and he gets the times that we are in. He gets the problem set, and he's trying to get to the right answers. And he's not going to repeat dogma that was relevant in 2004. Sorry. So that was a huge. That's why I'm a Vance guy. I think you should be a Vance guy too. I think Dolan is dated. Let him run for lieutenant governor. Okay, I would support him for lieutenant governor maybe, but he's not. We don't need him as a senator. We need somebody. These times are special times. They are dire times, and we need somebody who recognizes that, who is young and has vim and verb. There you go.
That's a fair point. And I listened to the audiobook of Hillbilly Elegy, and there's no denying the fact that for Vance to get to where he is today is remarkable because his upbringing was nothing that I'd imagine we could relate to.
No.
And for him just to, especially with his just immediate family, with his mother who was in and out of his life, and his father who really, I don't think in his life much, his grandmother raised him, and for him to end up where he is today is remarkable. And I give him a lot of credit there. I agree with what you say on his weaknesses. I think at times maybe I think he's got some good ideas. There are moments when you kind of question his authenticity and maybe is he taking it too far on stuff, but I would be content with him as our candidate. There's no doubt about it. I agree with pretty much what you said on a lot of the others. Mandel and let me think here. Who is it? Gabriel in the chat had mentioned here. He says no such thing as separation of church and state. He also perpetuates an anti-Muslim bigotry. He's a terrible person. He just, I don't know what his shtick is about coming into this so aggressively. And again, he was nowhere to be found during the Trump administration. And then out of the blue, he sees Portman's not running. He decided, I'm going to run for office again after he failed in 2012 to defeat Sherrod Brown. So I don't want him. You're spot on Gibbons. He had the lead. It seemed like for over.
I was kind of going towards Gibbons a little bit. If I'm being honest with you,
his money and his advertising campaign, I thought, worked wonders for him to really reintroduce himself. I know he ran statewide before, didn't fare too well, but he was really a way to reintroduce himself before any of the debates and all of that, and he could define who he was. And I thought it worked wonders. And then where he kind of had some blunders, where he had that debate where I think there was a question about women. And I don't know. I forget the whole thing, but it was just kind of a bizarre statement. And then his stance on taxes with the middle class and how there's so many, whatever that percentage that doesn't pay. Again, it just looks for like somebody like him as a wealthy businessman. He looks out of touch. And
He
then I think he was really hoping to get that Trump endorsement. And then once it didn't happen, I think his support has really kind of crumbled a bit after that endorsement, more so than anybody else, actually. I think kind of his numbers are the ones that you're really going to see kind of crater as a result
I do too.
of Trump endorsed Vance. Timken, it was funny because I remember we had Ryan Gerdusky on, and I thought Timken was going to be the person to beat, and she just really never caught on. I think you're right; she had a lot of the statewide network, that establishment network behind her, but I don't think she fared very well in the debate. She kind of seemed a little too rehearsed, and I think she did.
She's not good at it. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. She's not a good. The mom stuff is like, okay, come on, it's okay.
And I appreciate, and like I said, when Ryan was on, I appreciate what she did with investing resources in the Mahoning Valley and buying into this idea that the Mahoning Valley could go red. And she invested and supported those efforts. And sure enough, it did. So, she kind of fizzled out. Dolan, it's interesting today. Now, I will be the first to say I take a lot of what I read with a grain of salt on Twitter, because whoever posts something probably is going to have an agenda behind it. And when you see, what's Crystal's first name? Bill Crystal.
Bill Crystal's a horrible human being.
Bill Crystal.
No,
and then
he's a terrible human being.
I don't disagree with you. And then you have Mike Murphy, who's another
probably horrible too.
Yeah, we'll call them MSNBC Republicans, if you even want to call them Republicans. Kind of posting on some of this stuff about some momentum for Dolan. In my numbers, because so Dana has Vance at 27, Mandela 22, Gibbons 17, Dolan 14, Timken 8, Pukita 3, Patel 1. I have Vance at 26, winning it. Dolan and Mandela at 20, Gibbons at 16, Timken 13, Pukita 3, Patel 2. I do think there's probably a little bit of late, I want to say, movement towards Dolan with some people. There's been a lot of people on the fence, like myself, who have been undecided during this whole campaign. It's tough with 7 candidates and really nobody running away with it. And so I think there's maybe some validity to some of those tweets. I don't buy. And there was a third one today, a poll that actually had Dolan ahead of Vance. I question that. I think Dolan's going to fare okay. The problem is, I think you said it best. He represents a lot of what the old school Republican Party was about, and there's still a sizable chunk of those people out there. But is it enough in this kind of crowded race? I don't think so. So again, I'm on the fence between Vance and Dolan. I'd be content with either one of them being our guy as long as it's not Mandel. And so I'm in agreement with you on Vance. I think ultimately being the person.
So we've been going long, so I'll try to keep this pithy. Gabriel Shapiro made the point that Vance doesn't care about Ukraine. His words, not mine. I think that's a great thing. And I think it's a great thing because I think we have too many politicians who are more concerned with the borders of foreign countries than not our own. And, it's a shame that there's feces in the streets of Cleveland. We shut down people. We destroyed people's businesses. We threw people out of work for, nearly a year, if not longer, right? We're inflating away our currency. We've got double-digit inflation. It's 8.5% officially, but we all know it's higher than that. We have a stock market that's cratering, right? Like, these are not good times for America. And the political class is super concerned about Ukraine. Now, I support the Ukrainians, and I think what Russia is doing is wrong, but it's more complicated than Russia is evil and they're invading Ukraine and the Ukrainians are these poor, innocent people. There's a little bit more nuance to it, right? Even if you take the side of Ukraine. But what's sickening is that the politicians have jumped all over it. I mean, I see people that are flying the Ukrainian flag, and I'm sorry, Americans fought and died for America and for the American flag. And the soldiers that protect you and your freedom are American soldiers, right? And you pay tax dollars to the American government. So your loyalty should be to the United States alone. I don't think people should be flying Ukrainian flags, especially if it's the only flag you're flying, right? I don't know, maybe put a little one on your desk. But but that's what's refreshing about JD Vance is he's not a neocon. He's not a warmonger, right? He's not John McCain. There was never a single country. Everyone's like, John McCain's a good guy. John McCain, first of all, cheated on his wife, but second of all, he would have America involved in every single foreign neck of the woods conflict, right? John McCain was flying over Syria. We were arming Syrian rebels who were aligned with Al Qaeda, who are the same people that bombed us on 9/11, right? So to me, this neocon impulse to take whatever conflict is going on and to stick America's fingers in it, what happens is the people that tend to die are not the Matt Dolans of the world and not Matt Dolan's son, right? It's the people that came from where JD Vance came from. And JD Vance gets that. And to me, that's the most decisive point in his favor, is that I know Senator JD Vance is not going to advocate for some stupid conflict that's going to, fill in the pockets of Raytheon and all of the defense contractors. I don't know. Maybe this is so. That's why it's like that's what makes JD Vance truly different. That's what Donald Trump Jr., who's the guy that pushed for that endorsement. That's what he saw in JD Vance. He didn't. That's what separates him from the other ones, is that he is not going to be another vote for these endless wars. So that's why I like JD. I think he's going to win. I do think he's going to win.
Yeah, I will say this. I think JD's benefited a little bit from the fact that he has a relationship with Tucker Carlson. He got this Trump endorsement.
Sorry.
Because I don't think he's ran a great campaign
No.
outside of that. I think he's just benefited from those two things to have that exposure. I don't think he's done a great job of really going grassroots, going all around the state, meeting people. I know he's done it, but I think it's based on what I see on social media, it seems a lot less than some of the other candidates. And obviously your objective is to win, and he's trying to maximize his audience by going on Tucker Carlson. And I get that, but I think he's been fortunate that he ended up getting this Trump endorsement, because I don't think he up to that point he was doing what it took to win. That's just me, though. It just seemed like he was kind of middling along, and it wasn't going to work out. And Gibbons or Mandel were going to be the two.
Agreed. He ran a piss poor campaign until recently.
Yeah. So, but we will see what happens. We'll have our numbers out there come Tuesday. I'll be tweeting and posting up a storm, and we'll kind of compare our governor numbers and our Senate numbers to see kind of where things shake out. I'll be kind of curious, but we both agree. DeWine on the governor's side, Vance on the U.S. Senate side. We'll see if there's any last minute surprises. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we shall see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well,
okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to episode 36. It might take an extra day to get this up, the audio up, but we'll get this up later this week, so you can tune in. Appreciate everybody. Appreciate Taylor Armstrong from the Ohio College Republicans coming on. Like we said, he's very polished. He's got a big future ahead of him, and we enjoy hearing the young Republicans out there who support our show and tune in. So thank you, and thank you to those in the chat. If you enjoy this episode, be sure to, well, let me think. With a podcast, you don't really give it a thumbs up, but subscribe, right? Share it, like it.
Yeah.
Email it, or email it to your coworkers who like politics. I think we had a lot of good discussions today, and again, thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, we'll see what happens come Tuesday. Go vote.
Yeah, give me some COVID medicine.
What's that? And yes, let's make sure Dane and Shanley get better and recover from COVID-19.
Yeah. Okay.